get somebody to post-edit the output of the baseline engine and incrementally retrain and improve the performance of the system. So that's the best scenario. You're going to see that it doesn't play out here. The mix system also allows you to integrate bilingual glossaries into the system. This tends integrating lists of terms essentially into a system which has been learning to translate from a large body of sentence data is generally a bit disruptive and tends to it causes improvements in performance, but it can also cause degradation in performance. The mix system also allows you to process the source text prior to translation using monolingual glossaries. And I'll say a little bit more about these 2 points later, but I want to return to the top point, the top scenario, the post-editing scenario. In a second. Okay. Unfortunately, there is very little by-text translated parallel data for rugby. There's very little from World Rugby. World Rugby is the organisation which organises the Rugby World Cup every 4 years. And when you, even on their website, many of the articles which appear in Japanese and English are only partial translations of one another. So there are lots of sentences which are not translated or half translated. So that it's actually very time consuming to try to align those articles. And indeed, it turns out so it's not really worth the effort. So we need to resort to post-editing. But there's another problem now, and that's a mismatch in reporting styles and genres between English and Japanese, which has historical reasons. Even if the game in Japan is older than the game in Wales, not there's a mismatch. So essentially there are two kinds of texts which talk about rugby, which kind of approximate to the way that fans might like to talk about rugby with one another. One post-match reports. These are things which appear in the press or online, maybe within minutes of the game finishing, or maybe by the next day. You read in the newspaper. And the other are the in-match commentaries. These are the live, minute-by-minute, second-by-second commentaries which are made available through certain media. The biggest website for this internationally is one called Ultimate Rugby. So, post-match reports in English are many and varied. There are lots of English-speaking countries where rugby is well established. There are lots in any one country. There are several newspapers all and journalists all competing with one another. So you have many reports and very varied styles. I'll show you an example. In Japan, it's few and very uniform. So that translating from English to Japanese is actually quite challenging. Translating the other way is actually easier. In terms of in-match commentaries, there are lots available in English, and there's nothing in Japanese, virtually nothing. So we have a lack of source text data in Japanese, and when you're translating from English into Japanese, especially in this scenario, the in-match commentary scenario, there's a lack of a target text model. There's not a known style to adopt. It doesn't exist. Okay. So we're talking about post-editing by fans. These are not professional translators. They are rugby fans, arguably better qualified to do the job than most professional translators on the West. But so this is one set of problems. So the Japanese post-editors need to invent a genre, so to speak. So this is just a pretty picture to just remind you of the general cycle of translate, post-edit, retrain. So we have, we have here some perfectly formed Japanese text which goes into the MT system. It comes out as scrambled English. Actually, the post-editor is going to tidy it up so we have nice, proper, well-formed English, and that gets fed back into the system, which incrementally improves its performance. And the same cycle for English input text, scrambled Japanese, good Japanese, being fed back here. So we need, because of the absence, almost total absence of existing bytext, bilingual data, translation memories, we need to recruit post-editors, but we don't want to demotivate them with a quality of translation which is so bad that they just say, look, I just don't want to be involved in this project. They're not being paid, they're doing this for love of rugby, because they're retired and they've got nothing better to do. But we can't abuse their goodwill. And to be honest, the performance of the baseline system, it's the same with Google, it's the same with Bing, it's the same with all of the machine translation systems we've tried. The performance of the baseline out of the box or available online systems on rugby text is really bad. Okay. So there are people out there. Japan has a very large pool of potential recruits. After the UK, after England, it has the second largest number of registered rugby players in the world, about 250,000. And it's the world number one for veteran rugby players. Veteran being defined as over 40, but they go on to over 80 in great numbers. They're mostly university educated. It's a university game. It's like England, rugby in England in the 1960s. Okay? So many of them, I know from personal experience, know English well, have worked in English-speaking countries for several years. So the subject expertise is there, the understanding of English is there. In principle, we have a pool of possible recruits. But I say, if the output is so bad, with the current state of output, it will demotivate even the most ardent of rugby fans. Okay? So we need to get to a stage where monolingual post-editing is possible. So monolingual post-editing essentially means that the post-editing can be successfully done by somebody who does not necessarily know the source language, who just knows the target language, who can recognize mistakes, infelicities in the target output and correct them. Okay. If we can get closer to that point, then we can avoid demotivating our volunteer talent. Now, a lot of research Kern was with, I can't remember which languages now, that showed that monolingual post-editors could reach, well, sometimes their output was indistinguishable from that with a professional translator. Aikawa, Isahara, and others worked from Japanese to other languages and showed that this was possible. Schwartz et al. Have also shown that non-professional monolingual post-editors can produce translations which preserve 87.5% on average of the content of the original. So it's definitely been shown to be a feasible proposition. But rugby speak is a very special language, as I said, beyond the current reach of general purpose machine translation, and I want to show you some examples of that now. So it's opaque to outsiders, and from this table you might understand why, and to NT engines trained in general tech. So on the left is rugby language, and on the right is normal English. Okay. What we've got highlighted in red are words which just look like ordinary words of English, but which have very special interpretations, and therefore rather special translations into other languages. So Farrell goes high, he kicks the ball high. Would you know that? Okay. If you did, you must be a paid-up rugby fan. Okay. Tipperich recovers. Recovers what? From a hangover, from a bang to the head. No, he catches the ball before feeding Webb. Oh, is it nice to feed him? What was it? A segment of orange or a rice ball? No, it was passing the ball to Webb. Daly clears. Look at the expansion of that. Daly catches the ball in a deep defensive position and kicks it up. That's what clears means. Okay? Anybody, any rugby fan reading somebody clears can picture where Daly is, deep in defence in his or her. Women's rugby is also very big in Japan and elsewhere. And then kicks it up to him. So George hits Christ. No, it's not a fight between people on opposing teams. This is actually cooperation between people on the same team. So I'm trying to show you some examples of ordinary language, and you can see therefore why Google or the link baseline system or Bing make a total mess of translating this. So it's a big challenge. Problem features, homonymy, polysemy with respect to general language, concision, ellipsis. The ball, because the ball is everywhere in rugby, the ball is almost never mentioned. It's it, or it's just left out completely. Why mention something without which you can't play the game? So the mismatch which I talked about earlier between English and Japanese reporting styles makes things even worse. So here's an English post-match report. There's an extended metaphor running through this. Saracens, this sort of English rugby team, so expressive against Northampton last week, were lost for words in possession, muted by a furious rush defence. Rush defence is a technical term for rugby, and the retrieval qualities of low. They found their voice after Farrell replaced Sosowski, a move that allowed Good to roar. So this is The Guardian, my favourite English newspaper. This is the way The Guardian writes. Other newspapers will use different words, and this is an example of the multiplicity of styles that you encounter in English language press coverage. The Japanese, this is a back translation from Japanese for the benefit of everybody here. The Japanese basically tell you what happened. It's a description after the event, the summary of the main events on the field. Okay. So there's no metaphor, there's no poetry, there's no irony, there are no questions. It's just A does this, B does that, etc. That's how it goes. There are technical terms in here: halfback, scrum, return pass, flanker, try. There are technical terms in there, but it's much simpler than the previous one. Now, an example of an English in-match commentary, which is probably the closest we have in text to the kinds of exchanges we imagine fans having. It's closer to this, but it's a second by second, minute by minute, blow by blow report, so it tends to be very telegraphic, elliptical, very short sentences, segments. Scrum penalty to Japan, Nagari tries a clever inside flick, it's knocked on. No, clears. Oh, you know what clears means. Okay. So that's, we have We have an API which allows us to download data from the Ultimate Rugby website. So a monthly download gives us about 5 million words of such commentaries. Further solutions? No. Tentative solutions. So we don't want to demotivate people, so we need to get the system functioning a bit better to a tolerable level before inviting the fans to post edit. So a list of proper names, this is fairly obvious, names of players, coaches, referees, teams, stadium, about 1,700 entries and growing. Okay. And then technical terms, nouns. It's not really possible to add adjectives, adverbs, and verbs into a glossary for your machine translation system. So these are all single words and multi-word nouns. About 500 so far. So there's some examples. Even if you don't read kanji, you might see that these two things are identical. So we've got from English to Japanese and many to one relationship very often, which is related to the diversity of coverage. So going from English to Japanese is an easy question. Going from